Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for a Sunday edition to Film Fanatic. It is about 9:54, so I hope everyone's doing good. It's been uh, it's been another rain-soaked weekend. Well, I shouldn't say rain-soaked, but the forecast was supposed to be originally earlier this week. Monday, Tuesday, the forecast for this past weekend was not looking very good, especially Friday into Friday through Sunday. It was supposed to be pretty rainy and not looking very good or promising. And that's the thing that is so crazy. That's the thing I don't like about gigs in Maine or playing outside. I mean, literally 95% of gigs that I play at are outside during the summer. And I actually really enjoy playing outside. I know there are musicians out there that, don't like playing outside because, you're out in the elements, you know, uh, instruments, string instruments and things like that tend to go out of tune a lot quicker when you're outside. Um, you got to deal with bugs and mosquitoes. Sometimes the heat, if the heat is too, high, or if it gets too cold, and then obviously rain or snow or whatever. But I know, and then also too, depending on how the setup is, sometimes musicians don't like playing outside because of the acoustics. Depending where you're set up and the way the sound system is. But I've always really actually enjoyed playing outside. In some ways, I've almost enjoyed it more. But back quite a few years ago, you would, playing gigs, it would be a thing during the summer and springtime. Like you would have quite a few gigs come up or whatnot that would be, outside. But still, the majority of those gigs would be, or a good portion of them would be inside. And I attribute it to COVID and just all the craziness, but probably COVID mostly. But I most places now, at least for me, I mean, there still are gigs, and I know there are venues that still have bands inside. But I have to say, like 95%, maybe even more of the gigs that I do, whatever capacity it is, they're all outside. So it's a really different thing. And the other big shift is that times are very different. I had a gig this weekend that was over by 7:30, which, say 10 years ago, that was unheard of. You wouldn't even be sometimes arriving to the venue at 7:30. You would be getting there at like maybe, 8, and you'd go on at like 9 or 9:30 even, or 10 even. And if you're in a city, you know, if you're in like a bigger city, you wouldn't go on till 11. I remember there was a time I was playing a lot in New York City, and I remember there were a couple of gigs that I had that didn't start till like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'd get done at 3. By the time we pack everything up, because it's New York, you'd hang out for a while and then maybe get some food, go out for pizza, and get home at like 6:30 in the morning. The sun would be up, and that was like a typical thing when you'd play in a city, especially New York. But now it's like things end really early, so it's a whole in regards to playing gigs and all that, all those things that it entails. It's a totally different kind of thing. In some ways, it's cool. You get done early. You have the rest of your evening to kind of relax or whatever, and you don't have to like get home at like 4 in the morning, totally exhausted or whatever. But I kind of miss having gigs like that. Gigs that are a little bit later, but it's still fine. One thing I do notice is that's positive is that pay has increased quite a bit. I think most venues pay more now than they did say 10 years ago. I think it's a little bit more consistent. So it's got more, I think it's got more pluses than minuses. But the thing that I don't like is, well, the weather sucks pretty much all the time here, and most of the country. This summer has been some of the worst weather I have ever seen. It's about 10 o'clock now, and it was just a few minutes ago, just downpouring, But yesterday, and the forecast, like I said, for this weekend was that it was supposed to be a big washout. It was supposed to rain. So there was what ends up happening a lot is because there's so many gigs, at least this is my situation, but because there are gigs, the gigs that I do have or whatever, most of them are outside and the weather sucks. And so you have to like worry about cancellations and you have to worry about, okay, how is this going to work if it rains? And like, is there tarp? Is there, you know, the logistics of that? And a lot of the times people will be quick to cancel gigs when there's talk of rain, even here in Maine. There's been, because the season has been so rainy, like unprecedented, there's been a few places that have adapted to that and set up tarps and made the adjustments. But most places don't do that, which I don't understand. And, because it's this global, environmental shift that we're experiencing, I would think that most places would make that proactive decision to like, okay, well, we don't have this event, we have to cancel this event. It's going to cost us a lot of money, and it's going to be, money not earned, money not that's not taken in. So let's make this work. Let's get a tarp, let's get some tents set up, or maybe move the location, clear out some kind of space inside the venue. But that doesn't happen. So you have to really, play it by ear, and it's incredibly aggravating when it happens. But there's nothing you can do about it because you're subject to that. There's been a few gigs that I had where it did rain like insane, like at an insane amount. But the guys that were involved with the show were like, okay, we're going to make this work, and we'll just get some tarps and some tents. And they did it, and it worked. But it's pretty rare. I'm really surprised that, and it's always the musicians that take the initiative. I never see the venues do it. So it's really strange. I'm not sure why that's a thing, because you have to try to adapt, to your environment, especially when it's your life part of either it's part of your livelihood or it is your livelihood, particularly if you're running a business, working at a business, and then the musicians who are hired for these events or whatnot. The show must go on, no matter what. So, so that was a thing this weekend, but luckily everything happened and nothing was canceled. But the weather sucked. Like, it was totally like wet. It never rained, which was awesome. It never actually rained. It was just super like soupy weather. I mean, literally had to towel my stuff off. I felt like at one point I needed to wear a snorkel because of the amount of water that was in the air. It was just like, what the fuck? Crazy, crazy shit. And it's still, dense atmosphere right now. So next week will be our next two Quantum shows. So stay tuned for that. There's been I've been doing a lot of promotion for the show. This coming Friday, we're going to be doing a Quantum show at Sophia, which is a super cool bar in Belfast, Maine. Really love that place. I've been going. I went there a few times, like how I discovered it over the winter time. I went there a couple times, and very cool. I thought this would be a really sweet space, but then I remembered thinking like, wow, like maybe this would be a place for music. Maybe it would be a cool place to play music or go see music. But my first reaction was like, no way. It's way too small. There's no way in hell you can fit a band in here. And then like, fast forward a month or so, I saw that they had bands in there. and they had a full size band in there. There was the Becca Biggs band played in there, and they're a pretty good local band. They're like an indie folk band, pretty loud and rocking. Based out of Belfast, but a full piece band, like 5 people. So, and I'd seen them play before, but I was so curious, like, what the hell is that going to be like in this little place? So I went there. Not only I wanted to see them, but I went there more out of just curiosity of like the logistics of it. And I saw that they had a PA in there too, which was like kind of intriguing. So I went there and it was great. I was really surprised. I mean, it was super loud, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't too loud. It wasn't like, I felt like I was going to like a punk rock show or something. Like, even though they're a pretty loud rockin' band at times, they're definitely not like that kind of, they don't have that kind of edge to their music necessarily, but they're pretty rockin' and it's electrified. The drummer, Jake, who plays drums for the Tough Cats, is a very powerful drummer and he's really loud. I really like his playing a lot. So he's got that kind of punk rock thing going on big time. But it was a great show. I was really surprised. It was packed. It was nuts. It was so nuts. But nobody was complaining about the volume or, and it was cool. And then I had seen some other music there, and I really thought it was cool too. I dug it, and it was on an off night. It was on like maybe a Thursday, maybe it was a Saturday. I can't remember, but it was really good. And that's when I started thinking around that time, like, well, maybe we could do a quantum show here because it's just two of us. So maybe it's not that the logistics are maybe easier. So we have a show coming up this Friday, next week. Today's Sunday, so next week we will be playing there at 7:30. So stay tuned for that. And then the other thing that we got going on is on Saturday during the day we will be doing a radio show on my friend Spencer Roulard's show on WRFR, which is a radio station based in Rockland. So excited about that too. I'll do some promotion for that show this week, and we'll be probably playing like an hour or so set on the air at 2 o'clock. And we did a show on his radio. We did a radio show with Spencer about a month or two ago, a couple months ago, and we had some problems. We were going to try to record the show to see, maybe if the performance happened to be, pretty decent or maybe a good show. We were going to record it and then, have it as like something we can have use for content, sharing and promotional things. Because Spencer's really good at sound. He works for a sound company. And I had heard from a couple of friends that listened to the show, said that the sound was actually really good. Like the quality was really good. Because usually it's really hard getting good quality sound through when you're playing on the radio. Usually it's kind of pure shit. So, um, so that's the goal. We decided to try it again, and what we're going to try to do is record it. Hopefully, record it this time. So maybe if it happens to be a decent or good performance of our music, we can use it. So stay tuned for that. So today's show is on a movie that I really, really love, and and it's directed by one of my all-time favorite directors, and that is Roman Polanski. I love Roman Polanski. I think he's one of the greatest directors ever. He has done so many iconic movies, so many great masterpieces to his name. Chinatown, one of my all-time favorites, starring Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, just an amazing, amazing movie. Rosemary's Baby, which is probably his most popular or most well-known film, but such a masterpiece. Both of those movies, I eventually want to do a show on. Just an amazing movie. And like I said, he's always been and continues to be one of my favorite directors. You know, things his films are truly things of what legends are made of. I mean, his track record, the body of work, um, The Ninth Gate is another movie of his that I actually really like. It's a later movie that starred Johnny Depp, 1999, but I actually really like that movie. It's a later film of his. Carnage, which is a movie he put out in 2011, which is a newer, more recent film, which is actually really really good, really cool movie, really interesting, kind of a character study. It's kind of like a theater piece, but very good. One of my all-time favorites, I think, one of the greatest of his career is the Fearless Vampire Killers, which came out in 1967. Amazing, amazing, amazing movie. I honestly think it's probably one of the greatest, even though it's got this very spoofy. It's kind of like a black comedy. I kind of think it's one of the greatest vampire movies ever made. It's just so awesome. I love that movie. It's so entertaining. Um, The Tenant, which is such a masterpiece. Another amazing movie, 1976. Bitter Moon in 1992. Another great film. Another one of his films that I just think is such a masterpiece, which is something I need to get to, is Repulsion, 1965. That movie is such a great film. Roman Polanski's definitely crossed over and has definitely made horror movies. He's done crime dramas, film noir, obviously Chinatown. He's done melodramas, comedies, which I do consider a comedy. The Fearless Vampire Killer is like a dark comedy or a black comedy. The Ghost Rider, which is actually a really awesome movie. It's another one of his later films, 2010. Really cool movie. The Palace in 2023, which I have not seen, and it says it came out 2023. I have to check that out. He also did Macbeth, the Shakespeare, based on the classic Shakespearean play in '71, which is so badass, so awesome, really great movie. Um, Frantic with Harrison Ford, which is actually a really awesome movie, also. Another one of his that is just an unparalleled classic, which is a movie I need to get to, is Knife in the Water. I have Repulsion, Knife in the Water, Rosemary's Baby. I have the essential movies. I have most of them on Blu-ray. Um, but just so many great films, so many great movies. Those are definitely my favorite. I mean, but just a huge. The Pianist he did with Adrian Brody, which is a really great movie. That's one of his, that came out in the late '90s, I believe now. But today's show is centered on a movie I never hear talked about, and it's definitely one of my favorite Polanski movies, and it's called Death in the Maiden. Just, just a masterpiece. So damn good. Such a great story. So incredibly suspenseful. And, if you're a Sigourney Weaver fan, which I am, I think it's one of her best roles. It also stars Ben Kingsley, another, legend in the world of acting. And the two of them together is just unbelievable. It's the chemistry, the intensity. It's really a great character study. It really shows how deep the ability for both of those actors truly are to transform themselves. They play very unique roles. It feels like a play, but it is such an incredible movie. Highly, highly suspenseful. It's got one of the greatest endings I think ever. And it came out in 1994. I only have this film on DVD, and it's again Roman Polanski has a real, amazing visual sense as a director, as well as being an incredible storyteller. And this movie really has an incredible kind of visual aesthetic behind it. It's it's just an awesome movie. One of my favorites, and I never really hear it talked about. It's come up a few times over the years, in conversation where might talk with somebody here or there about Roman Polanski, or we'll start talking about film, and I'll talk about when maybe his name will come up, and I just always say he's one of my favorites. And then I always talk. There's been quite a few times where I've brought this movie up, Death and Maine. Like have if I'll ask that person if they've seen it, and 9 times out of 10 they've never seen it or have even heard of it. And I highly recommend it. It's just such an awesome movie. A good buddy of mine, I remember years ago, Charlie Hendrick, who I've talked a lot about. I remember he's a huge movie file guy and so knowledgeable. But I remember he's also a very big Polanski fan, and he had never seen Death in the Maiden, and I remember him recommending it to him. He had never even heard of it, and I remember after I told him about it, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks or so went by, and he told me that he saw it and he watched it, and he said it was just incredible. He was really blown away by it, and he had never heard of it before. But such an awesome movie. This DVD is pretty good. I need to get it. It would be great to get this on Blu-ray at some point. It doesn't have any special features. There is commentary on here that's pretty decent by Polanski. But again, Polanski's really known for his visual flair, as well as just masterful direction. But this would be great to see on Blu-ray. I've never seen it on Blu-ray. I've never come across it on Blu-ray. I'm sure it exists, and it would be cool to get a package or an edition of this movie that had lots of bonus features. I think that would be pretty sweet. But an amazing movie, 1994. It's kind of a disturbing movie. It's a rough movie. It's very raw. Polanski's known for definitely pushing the envelope in his the envelopes in his for his films. But just such a damn good movie. I love this movie. And I don't believe I've done any shows on Polanski, which is kind of weird because he's one of my favorite directors. But I just thought eventually I'll do more. I will definitely do, I'll do a show on Rosemary's Baby or, Repulsion. Movies that are, especially Rosemary's Baby, for instance, which is a movie that I think it's safe to say is probably his most well-known movie, his most successful movie. That movie was when Rosemary's Baby came out, that was a huge hit, and that really catapulted his career. He became a huge star after that movie because it was a massive hit. And that movie's really acclaimed, and rightfully so, because I think that movie is just incredible. And so I could have started with a more popular movie of his, but I decided to do this movie because I just never hear anyone talk about it. Eventually I'll do a show on Rosemary's Baby because it's a masterpiece. And I have that on Blu-ray, and it's really great. So, yeah, amazing movie, Death and the Maiden. Kind of a departure. It's pretty different than a lot of his other films, but again, his films are so character-based. The characters are so flushed out, and they're just so highly suspenseful. So, I can't recommend this movie enough. Death and Maiden, starring the fantastic Ben Kingsley and Sigourney Weaver from 1994. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.